Thank you, Air Marshal Gokhale, for inviting me here, and Ms. Gauri Dulkar Oak for inviting me, both of you, on behalf of the CAS and the Lokmanya organization, to speak particularly on this topic, which I think is very current and which has attracted the attention of people all over the world, particularly at this juncture when so much is happening in China, behind the bamboo curtain, as they put it. Let me just, in the few minutes that I have, try and paint a picture of what is happening inside China and how it impacts all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean all the speakers and the audience. China itself has been going through a fairly difficult time for some years now, particularly with their reforms, with their trying to switch from an export-led economy to one promoting domestic consumption. This has led to a lot of unemployment, to closure of factories, to closure of small mines, and to the shutting down of various restaurants. In the midst of this, their new leader, Xi Jinping, he introduced a range of policies, primarily intended, of course, to weed out opposition to him, and secondly, to weed out corruption, the anti-corruption campaign. What we are seeing in China is the most sustained campaign that has been undertaken ever in the People's Republic of China against corruption. It has seen by September 2017 over 170 odd officers of the rank of Major General and above in the People's Liberation Army being dismissed. It has seen over 175 cadres of the rank of Vice Minister, which is equivalent to the Secretary to the Government of India, dismissed, all on charges of corruption, and over 1 million other party members and cadres. This is across the board. But of course, the question is, has corruption stopped? It hasn't. It is still going on. In fact, in a very, I think, timely release, Al Jazeera just 3 days ago published a report indicating that there are 500 Chinese who have acquired what are called golden passport of Cyprus, which means you have to invest about 2.5 million euros in order to get those passports, and there are 500 Chinese officials in them. Many of them have been named. So this is what Xi Jinping has unleashed. He has also brought in a policy for reducing ostentatious consumption or curbing ostentatious consumption, and that, mind you, by itself has led to a drop in GDP output by between 3 to 5%. So you can imagine the amount of consumption that was going on public funds. All that he has tried to curb. It has gained him a lot of popularity, but within the Chinese Communist Party and its establishment, of course, it hasn't been very well received. But actually, China's difficulties have mounted since, I would say, March 2018, which was when the Party Congress finished and the accompanying National People's Congress, where Xi Jinping ignored the prescribed informal regulations imposing term limits on promotion of senior cadres and for occupying certain posts like that of president, and promoted people. That led to a lot of discontent, including in the Chinese Communist Party. Let's not forget that around 30 to 35% of serving Chinese Communist Party members in the Central Committee have been through the Cultural Revolution, or as they put it, have suffered the Cultural Revolution, and they said they don't want a return to the old authoritarian ways of a one-man rule like under Mao Zedong. So they were very clear about it. There has been a lot of protest from students, from academics, etc. All this has been magnified by the very strict and progressively restrictive security measures that Xi Jinping has been introducing. These are intended, in fact, to control society. And let me only mention one of them, which is the social credit management system. It's an amazing system that combines AI and other technologies, and in that there is a 360, as they say, 360-degree review of every individual in China. And the program is supposed to be in force by the end of this year, by the end of 2020. And this means, this implies that a person's relatives, friends, neighbors, subordinates, seniors, friends, banks, businesses would all comment on him, and he would then be given a number by the party which will determine where he stays, which schools his children go to, if any, how he can travel, whether he can travel, and if he travels, whether he can go by rail or by air, whether he goes by first class or not. All that is going to be determined by that one number. And the same thing, of course, will carry on for his child. So obviously, people are very upset by this kind of a restriction which is being brought in. But China's problems got magnified even further. And the trigger for that was Xi Jinping's declaration at the 19th Party Congress of the goals for China over the next few years. So he laid down the China dream to be achieved by the 100th year of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, that is 2021. And the China dream was to make the Chinese people wealthy, which is doubling of their per capita income, to make the Chinese nation strong and prosperous. And here is the most ominous part of it, which is to effect or bring about the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation. Now, this last bit actually means the recovery of territories which they feel were lost through the imposition of unequal treaties by hostile foreign powers. It has a direct impact, of course, on many countries, many of China's neighbors, and especially us. We look at particularly Arunachal, bits of the central part of the border, like in Himachal Pradesh, and Ladakh, being immediately affected since China has laid claim to them. So this was one plan. The second, he said, was made in China by 2025, which is to put China on par with the world's most advanced technology powers. And then he said his final aim or final goal was to make China a major power with pioneering global influence. In other words, to be able to create or influence international organizations that are in existence. Translated, that means to put China on par with, or if not overtake, the United States of America. And that was by 2049, which is again not very far away. That is the 100th year of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Now, these declarations at the 19th Party Congress were the trigger for the US-China trade war, which started shortly after March 2018, and where we saw a series of tough measures being taken by the United States. The United States' central aim was not trade, it was to contain China's rise and to prevent it from becoming a threat. And therefore, they very deliberately targeted what is today probably the single most vital factor in a country's growth and development, which is technology. And they targeted Made in China 2025. The first target was one of the champions of China's IT sector, which is ZTE. The manner in which the United States went about it, it's almost bankrupted that company. The next was Huawei, which is the number one technology company of China. It's been brought down to its knees, and as of this September, they will stop manufacturing the smartphone, and they're going to find it even more difficult as time goes on to even complete the 5G rollout with in the absence of wafers, microchips, imaging chips, etc., that can only be sourced from 3 or 4 companies around the world, and all are dependent on US permission to sell them. The United States has also, in this process, been targeting the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, Mike Pompeo has on various occasions, and particularly in his speech at the Nixon Library Center, singled out China's desire to impose communist ideology on the world as something that has to be prevented. And this has, shall I say, sent the jitters to the Chinese Communist Party. This, along with two other sanctions that came in. One was a sanction against Chinese officials actively involved in the formulation of repressive policies or in their implementation in initially Xinjiang, later extended also to Hong Kong. And the second is still only a proposal, but it has sent shockwave through the Chinese Communist Party, and that was to ban any Chinese Communist Party member from getting a US visa. Now, as you all know, many of them joined the party in order to get the benefits, in order to travel abroad, particularly to the United States, or to send their children there. Many of them have assets in the United States, in Australia or Canada, which have suddenly now become vulnerable in case the US actually makes this proposal a law. But China itself, apart from these considerations, has also been very troubled. I won't go into details because we have three eminent speakers who will talk about it. But if we look at it, since the time China became the People's Republic of China, which is 70 years now, there has been rioting initially, but restiveness consistently in the Tibet Autonomous Region and in the other parts of Tibet, which have now been merged into other provinces. There has been trouble, unceasing trouble, in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and of late, troubles have erupted in Mongolia. And all these are part of the People's Republic of China. China also upheld a principle called one country, two systems, with which they hoped to entice Hong Kong and Taiwan to become part of China. Hong Kong they finally got because of the lease agreement that had been signed many years ago with Britain. But what we are all seeing is that the Hong Kong people, after reverting to China, are now saying they don't want any part of it. They want to opt out. The national security laws seem to again have triggered a lot of problems, and there is a lot of agitation there. People have recently escaped from Hong Kong, gone to UK, USA, etc. But I'm sure we'll hear more about that later. And finally, the Taiwan. Taiwan has made it very clear, particularly after the Hong Kong problems, after the national security law was enacted, saying that they are not going to accept the one country, two systems. So China's grand plan for the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation seems to have a big question mark on it, and it is unlikely, in my view, for them to be able to achieve it by 2021. India certainly is not going to allow them a free pass as far as our territories are concerned. Let me finish on one note, which is that even if we look at the map of China, just Tibet and Xinjiang together account for half of the Chinese land area. So that is the extent of trouble in the People's Republic of China, which is going on. The troubles have been magnified. There is a lot of uncertainty. Tensions are very high right now between the US and China, with the introduction of the menace of possible military conflict in the South China Sea. So what we are seeing is a very uncertain time ahead, not only for China, but for its neighbors. And let me conclude by looking a bit at the internal scene and saying that this uncertainty is also there on Xi Jinping's continuance in office. Because I think if push comes to shove, over a period of time, the Chinese Communist Party, if it finds the pressure from the United States becoming too much, they might even suggest that Xi Jinping eases out after his term ends and someone else comes in. So on this note, I'll end my comments here. Thank you very much.